Greetings to all. Welcome to PCM Under One Roof, our YouTube channel. This video shows you how to find angles between two vectors. To understand angles between two vectors, I recommend watching Introduction to Vectors video. In the description box, I have given you a link. The key to finding the angle between two vectors is to draw both vectors from one point so that their arrows point outward. Let us consider two vectors A and B. Here you can see that the arrows of both vectors are directed outward from the point O. When both vectors are directed outwards from the same point, we can take the angles between the two vectors as such without needing to redraw them. The angle given here is 60 degrees. As a result, the angle between two vectors A and B is 60 degrees. We will now analyze the given figure. Here, the arrows of two vectors are pointing outward from the point O. In this case, the angle between the two vectors is 180 degrees. Let us now take a closer look at this vector diagram. In this example, the arrow of vector A points outwards from point O and the arrow of vector B points inwards from the point O. The given angle of 60 degrees cannot be regarded as an angle between vectors A and B. Please keep in mind that when finding the angle between two vectors, both arrows point outwards from the same point. From the previous slide, we have seen that we cannot refer to a given angle as an angle between two vectors if the arrow between the two vectors does not point outward from the same point. Let us see how to find the angle between two vectors in such a case. All we have to do is extend the vector whose arrows don't point outward. Extend means just making the vector or that line longer. Now, let us take a closer look at this figure. The arrow of B vector touches point O and does not point outward. The vector B needs to be extended beyond point O. During this process, the arrow of the vector B starts to point outward from point O when we are increasing the length. As a result of extending vector B, both vectors A and B are now pointing outward from point O. After extending the vectors, we can see that the angle between the two vectors becomes x. Now, we must determine what value x is. As we can see from simple geometry, x plus y is 180 degrees because it is a semicircle. As we know that y is 60 degrees, then x must be 120 degrees. Therefore, the angle between vectors A and B is 120 degrees. Let us examine this figure and determine the angle between vectors A and B. Here, vector B does not extend outward from point O. In accordance with my previous slide, let us extend and increase the length of vector B. As we extend the B vector, its arrow points outward from point O. Hence, the angle between the two vectors becomes x, which must be determined. X plus y is 180 degrees, so x is 60 degrees. Therefore, the angle between vectors A and B is 60 degrees. Let us resolve a challenging problem. We need to determine the angle between vectors B and C in this figure. First, we must draw the vectors B and C separately. Following this, we are able to see that point B is a common point from both vectors B and C. It can be seen that the arrow of C vector points outward, whereas the arrow of B vector does not. As a final step, we need to extend B vector outward from point B and make the arrow of that vector point outward as well. As a result, the angle between B and C has become 135 degrees. A problem is presented here to test your understanding. Find the angle between vector A and vector C in the given figure. Please share your answer in the comment section. Thank you. Please share your comments about this video.